In the Great Depression era, some families had only a few cans, but dinner still had to show up, not fancy, just real food that kept people going. These are 60 cheap pantry dinners families made on about $2 a week, but how they were made and why we stopped making them. Some of these meals sound plain today, but they helped parents stretch paychecks. People are asking why nothing tastes like the potato and onion skillet as it used to. Let's discover these Depression-era dinners. Walk into a small kitchen in January 1932 and hear potatoes hit a hot pan with a soft hiss. The room smells like onion and salt. This meal mattered because it was cheap, fast, and filling. Grandma used what she had: potatoes, 1 onion, and a spoon of fat. She cut the potatoes small so they cooked quick. She let them sit in the pan long enough to get brown on the bottom. Then she flipped them, not too much, so they stayed crisp. Onion went in last, so it did not burn. If there was only a little fat, she spread it with care, like paint. Some nights she added a pinch of flour to make the pan drips thick. That made it feel like gravy. People stopped making it because they think it is just potatoes. But the pan-brown taste is the whole point. Next is bread and beans, and the bread is the trick. Walk into a cold kitchen in March 1933 and hear a pot lid rattle as beans simmer. The air smells like onion and warm steam. This meal mattered because one pot could feed more than one day. Grandma started with dry beans and water. If she had time, she soaked them. If not, she cooked them longer. She added salt late so the beans would get soft. She mashed a few beans with a spoon to make the broth thick. Then she poured the beans over toast. The toast was not just bread. It was a plate you could eat. It soaked up the bean juice and made the bowl feel bigger. If there was a little fat, she stirred it in at the end for shine and taste. People stopped making this because it looks plain, but it kept families full. Next is rice and beans, and it changed the whole week. Walk into a busy kitchen in September 1934 and smell rice cooking, clean and soft. Beans are nearby, thick and dark. This meal mattered because it stretched small food into many meals. Grandma cooked rice first, then kept it covered so it stayed hot. She cooked beans in another pot, slow. When the beans were ready, she spooned them over rice. The rice drank the bean broth like a sponge. That made one ladle feel like two. She saved the last bean liquid for tomorrow because that was free flavor. If she had onion, she cooked it in a little fat and poured it in. That made the bowl smell rich even if it was not. People stopped making it because it is not fun, but it is smart food. It keeps you steady. Next is cornmeal mush, and the secret is how it cools. Before we move on, many of you asked in the comments where to find these recipes. We even received tons of email too, so we published these recipes on our website. The link is in the description. Let's continue. Walk into a warm kitchen in February 1931 and hear cornmeal hit boiling water with a soft splash. The pot turns thick fast. This meal mattered because cornmeal was cheap and it filled the belly. Grandma stirred hard so it did not clump. She cooked it until it got smooth and heavy. Then she did something important. She poured it into a pan to cool. After it set, she could slice it later and fry it, or eat it soft right away. For supper, she put hot mush in a bowl and poured milk over it. A little sugar if there was any. Sometimes just salt. The milk cooled the mush and made it easier to eat. People stopped making it because they think it is poor food, but it was a plan, not a joke. Next is fried cornmeal cakes, and the pan is what makes them taste good. Walk into a kitchen in November 1932 and hear a pan crackle as cakes fry. The smell is warm corn and hot fat. This meal mattered because it turned cheap mush into something new. Grandma used leftover cornmeal mush from yesterday. She sliced it into thick squares. She dusted it with a little flour, if she had it, to help it brown. Then she fried it until the edges got crisp. The inside stayed soft. She served it with milk, syrup, or just salt. Some nights she put a little onion on top for bite. The key was patience. She did not flip too soon. She let a brown crust form first. That crust made it feel like real food, not leftovers. People stopped making it because it takes a pan and time, but it saves money. Next, we go to hot water cornbread, and it is faster than you think. You just saw the real pattern. One cheap thing becomes 2 meals when you cool it, slice it, and fry it. That is not old food. That is skill. Next 5 dinners look even simpler, but one of them hides a trick that can cut your grocery bill fast. Walk into a tight kitchen in April 1932 and hear the kettle sing. The air smells like corn and heat. This meal mattered because it used pantry food and made it taste like a real treat. Grandma put cornmeal in a bowl and added salt. Then she poured in hot water and stirred fast. The mix turned thick right away, like wet sand. She did not wait for it to rise. She did not need eggs. She did not need milk. She shaped small cakes with a spoon or her hands. Then she slid them into a hot pan with a little fat. You hear the first hiss, and you know it will work. She cooked them until the edges got brown and crisp. Inside stayed soft and hot. Some people ate them plain. Some ate them with beans. People stopped making them because they think cornbread must be baked. But this one is fast, cheap, and strong. Next is onion gravy on biscuits, and the smell is the warning. Walk into a kitchen in January 1934 and smell onions cooking slowly. The smell is sweet and sharp at the same time. This meal mattered because it could turn plain bread into supper. Grandma sliced onions thin and cooked them in a little fat. She did not rush them. She let them turn soft and brown. Then she added flour and stirred until it looked dry. Next, she poured in water or milk, just a little at a time, and kept stirring. The gravy turned smooth and thick. She added salt and pepper. If there was no meat, the onion was the meat. She poured the gravy over biscuits. The biscuits could be baked or even cooked in a pan if the oven was not used. The gravy soaked in and made the plate feel heavy. People stopped making it because it looks too plain. But it tasted like care when money was gone. Next is white gravy on biscuits, and it fooled people. Walk into Grandma's kitchen in October 1931 and hear flour hit hot fat with a soft. The smell is warm and plain, like bread. This meal mattered because it was quick and it filled you up. Grandma made a roux. Fat and flour cooked together. She stirred until it smelled a little toasted. Then she added milk slowly, stirring the whole time. The gravy turned white and thick. She shook in pepper and salt. If she had a little meat grease, she used that for more taste. She poured the gravy over biscuits while both were hot. The biscuits drank the gravy and turned soft. That made one biscuit feel like 2. People stopped making this because they think it is old food. But it was smart food. It turned pantry basics into comfort. Next is tomato soup over rice, and the rice is the trick that makes it last. Walk into a kitchen in March 1935 and smell tomato soup, warming, sharp and sweet. You hear rice simmer in a small pot, quiet and steady. This meal mattered because it could stretch one can into many bowls. Grandma cooked rice plain, then spooned it into bowls. She heated tomato soup and thinned it with water if she had to. Then she poured it over the rice. The rice soaked it up and made the soup feel bigger. It also cooled it so kids could eat faster. If she had onion, she cooked it first and added it in. If she had salt, she used a pinch. That was it. Simple on purpose. People stopped making it because it looks like poor food. But it was a plan. It used cheap rice to carry the soup. It made one can last more nights. Next is tomato soup over crackers, and the crunch is not extra. Walk into Grandma's kitchen in December 1932 and hear crackers snap in her hands. Tomato soup steams in a pot, red and sharp. This meal mattered because it made a small amount feel like a full bowl. Grandma warmed tomato soup and kept it hot. She did not pour crackers in the pot. She crushed crackers into the bowl first. Then she poured soup over them and watched them swell. The crackers turned soft fast, like quick dumplings. Some stayed crisp at the top. That mix of soft and crunch made it feel bigger and better. If she had a little milk, she added a splash to calm the acid. If she had pepper, she used it. People stopped making it because it looks too simple, but it was a fast comfort. It also saved money because crackers were cheap. Next is cabbage and potatoes, and it smells like a long winter. Notice what keeps happening. The pantry stays the same, but the shape changes. Cakes, gravy, bowls, soft dumplings. That is how people ate on almost nothing. Next 5 dinners will show the real enemy, food waste that costs you twice. Walk into a small kitchen in February 1933 and smell cabbage steam rise like a wet blanket. You hear a pot murmur, slow and steady. This meal mattered because it was cheap, warm, and made a little food feel like a lot. Grandma cut potatoes into chunks so they did not melt away. She sliced cabbage thin so it would go soft and sweet. She put water in the pot, added salt, and let it cook a long time. The kitchen got warm even if the house stayed cold. When it was ready, the broth tasted like cabbage and starch. She did not waste it. She poured it in the bowl, too. If there was any fat, she added a small spoon at the end. That made the smell deeper. People stopped making this because cabbage smells too strong. But in winter, strong smell meant food was coming. Next is stewed cabbage with bacon fat, and the fat changes everything. Walk into Grandma's kitchen in November 1934 and smell cabbage hit hot fat. The smell turns sweet and sharp at once. This meal mattered because 1 spoon of fat could make a whole pot taste rich. Grandma put a little bacon fat in the pan, then added cabbage. She stirred until it wilted down. Then she added a splash of water and put a lid on. The cabbage cooked slow and got soft. She added salt, pepper, and maybe a pinch of sugar if it was too sharp. The key was not to rush. If it cooked long, it got sweet. If it cooked fast, it stayed harsh. She served it with bread or potatoes, whatever was there. People stopped making it because bacon fat is not kept on the stove now. They throw it away. But saving it was a big deal. It was free flavor. Next is carrot and potato stew, and it looks plain, but it has a smart step. Walk into a kitchen in March 1932 and smell carrots turn sweet in a pot. The stew is thick and orange gold. This meal mattered because it used cheap roots that lasted a long time. Grandma cut carrots and potatoes into small pieces so they cooked at the same speed. She started onions first if she had them, just to build taste. Then she added water and let it simmer. The smart step was thickening. She mashed a few potato bits against the side of the pot. That made the broth creamy without milk. She used salt and pepper, nothing more. If there was any fat, she added a spoon at the end. It made the smell warmer. People stopped making it because they want meat in stew. But this one still fills you up. It is simple on purpose. Next is turnip and potato mash, and it has a sharp bite people forgot. Walk into Grandma's kitchen in January 1935 and smell turnips cook, sharp and sweet. The pot smells like winter. This meal mattered because it stretched potatoes with a cheaper root. Grandma peeled turnips and potatoes and boiled them together. She cooked them until they went soft. Then she drained them, but she saved a little hot water on the side. She mashed the pot with a fork or a potato masher. If it got dry, she added a splash of the saved water. If there was milk, she used it, but often there was not. She added salt and pepper. Turnips gave the mash a small bite, like pepper. That kept it from tasting flat. People stopped making it because they think turnips taste old. But old does not mean bad. It means cheap and strong. Next is lentil soup, and it cooks faster than beans. Walk into a kitchen in October 1933 and smell lentils simmer, earthy and warm. You hear a spoon scrape the pot. This meal mattered because lentils cook fast and fill you up. Grandma rinsed lentils, then put them in water. She added onion if she had it, and salt later, not first. She let it simmer until the lentils went soft and the broth turned thick. The smart move was stirring near the end. Some lentils broke down and made the soup feel creamy. No milk needed. She ate it with bread, or over rice if she had rice. People stopped making lentil soup because they do not buy lentils now. They buy boxes. But lentils are still cheap and strong. They keep you full. Next is split pea soup, and the smell tells you when it is ready. You see the lie now. Cheap did not mean weak. Cheap meant smart. These meals did not need a store trip. They needed time, heat, and a plan. Next, 5 pots get even bigger, and one of them starts with a bone. Walk into a kitchen in December 1931 and smell peas and onion cooking low and slow. The pot makes a soft blub sound. This meal mattered because split peas were cheap and they turned thick without much help. Grandma rinsed the peas and put them in water. She added onion if she had it. If she had a spoon of fat, she used it. Then she let it simmer for a long time. She stirred now and then so it would not stick. The peas broke down and made the soup feel creamy. That meant you did not need milk. If there was a bone, she dropped it in for taste, but many times there was not. She added salt near the end. She served it with bread, and she saved the rest for tomorrow. People stopped making it because it looks green and plain, but it fills you up fast and keeps you warm. Next is navy bean soup, and the pot gets even thicker. Walk into Grandma's kitchen in March 1934 and smell beans cooking all day. The air is warm and heavy. This meal mattered because it made many bowls from one bag. Grandma picked the beans and rinsed them. If she could, she soaked them. If not, she just cooked them longer. She kept the heat low so the pot did not burn. She added onion, salt, and pepper, if she had them. The smart move was mashing some beans at the end. That made the broth thick like gravy. It made one bowl feel like a full plate. She ate it with bread or over rice. If there was a little fat, she stirred it in last for taste. People stopped making bean soup because it takes time. They want fast food. But time was the tool back then. This soup also made good leftovers. It got better the next day. Next is ham bone bean pot, and it starts with what most people throw away now. Walk into a kitchen in January 1935 and smell smoke and salt from a ham bone. The pot steams like it is alive. This meal mattered because a bone could feed a family again. Grandma saved the bone from a Sunday meal. She put it in a pot with water and let it simmer until the water tasted like meat. Then she added beans. The beans cooked slow, and the broth turned rich. She skimmed the top if it looked too greasy, but she did not waste the taste. When the beans were soft, she pulled the bone out and picked off any meat left. That meat went back in the pot. Then she salted it only if needed, because the bone was salty. People stopped making this because they buy meat in packs and toss scraps, but scraps were gold then. Next is thin potato soup, and the trick is how it feels thick anyway. Walk into Grandma's kitchen in February 1932 and smell potato steam, plain and warm. This meal mattered because potatoes were cheap and always there. Grandma peeled and diced potatoes small. She boiled them in water with salt. If she had onion, she added it. The soup looked thin, but she knew how to fix that. She smashed some potatoes in the pot to thicken it. That made the broth feel creamy without cream. If there was milk, she added a splash at the end, but often there was not. If there was a little fat, she stirred it in for taste. She served it hot with bread on the side. It was not fancy. It was steady. People stopped making it because they think soup must have meat. But this one still warms you and fills you up. Next is milk toast, and it sounds odd until you taste it hot. Walk into a small kitchen in October 1930 and smell warm milk with butter. You hear toast snap as it breaks. This meal mattered because it used bread and milk to make quick comfort. Grandma toasted bread, then tore it into a bowl. She warmed milk in a pan, not boiling, just hot. She added a little butter if she had it, and a pinch of salt. Some nights she added sugar, but not always. Then she poured the hot milk over the toast. The bread went soft fast, and the bowl turned warm and thick. It was easy to eat when you were tired or sick. It also made a little milk go farther. People stopped making milk toast because it sounds too plain, but it is gentle food. It calms the body. Next is cinnamon sugar toast, and it tastes like a small treat on a hard week. You just passed the first real wall, soups and toast that cost almost nothing but still felt like dinner. Next, the meals get louder, fried bread, eggs, and sweet tricks that kept kids happy when there was no money. Walk into a small kitchen in March 1931 and smell warm toast and sweet spice. The stove clicks. The table is bare. This meal mattered because it felt like a treat when treats were not allowed. Grandma toasted bread until it was dry and stiff. She used old bread because it held up better. If she had butter, she used a tiny swipe. If she did not, she used a bit of saved fat. Then she mixed sugar and cinnamon in a cup and shook it over the toast. If there was no cinnamon, she used sugar alone. If there was no sugar, she used a thin touch of molasses and spread it fast. The smart move was heat. She did not serve it cold. She held the toast near the oven door or set it back on a warm pan for 1 minute so the sugar melted and stuck. That made a crisp slice feel soft on top, like a thin crust. Kids ate it fast. Grown-ups ate it slow with coffee. People stopped making it because it looks too simple and too cheap. But cheap was the point. It gave comfort without a store trip. It also used what was left. Next is fried bread, and it turns scraps into supper. Walk into Grandma's kitchen in August 1932 and hear bread hit hot fat with a sharp hiss. The smell is toast, smoke, and salt. This meal mattered because it used the part nobody wanted, drippings. Grandma kept them in a tin by the stove. Each spoon was saved on purpose. When supper was thin, that tin was power. She used stale bread, not soft, fresh bread. She cut it in thick slices so it would not fall apart. She warmed the drippings in a pan, then laid the bread in flat. She did not poke it. She let it sit until the bottom went brown and crisp. Then she flipped it once. The outside got crunchy. The inside stayed soft. If she had onion, she cooked it first, then pushed it aside and fried the bread in the onion taste. If she had salt, she used a pinch. Some nights she made it sweet by dusting sugar after. Some nights she kept it plain and salty. People stopped making this because they throw drippings away and call them bad. But back then, throwing that away was like throwing money away. This bread kept people full and warm. Next is eggs on toast, and the trick makes one egg feel bigger. Walk into a kitchen in February 1934 and smell warm egg and toast. You hear a fork beat a cup fast. This meal mattered because eggs could turn a hard day into a real plate. Grandma used one egg when that was all she had. She cracked it into a tin cup and beat it hard until it got foamy. Then she added a splash of water or milk if there was any. That was the stretch. More air meant more bites. She warmed a small bit of fat in a pan, then poured the egg in. She cooked it slow, not fast, so it made soft folds, not dry crumbs. She kept moving it, but gentle. Toast went on the plate first. The eggs went on top while still wet, so the toast caught the taste. If she had pepper, she used it. If she had onion, she cooked it first, then poured egg over it. If she had no bread, she ate the eggs plain from the pan. People stopped making this for supper because eggs got pricey, and folks call eggs breakfast. But hunger does not care about labels. This was quick, warm, and kind. Next is egg drop soup, and it looks thin, but it feeds more than you think. Walk into Grandma's kitchen in October 1933 and see a pot barely move. The steam is light. The smell is salt and onion. This meal mattered because one egg could feed many mouths. Grandma boiled water with a pinch of salt. If she had saved broth, she used that. If she had an onion, she simmered it first so the water had taste. She beat one egg in a cup. Then she stirred the pot fast with a spoon and poured the egg in slow. The egg turned into soft ribbons right away. It looked like more than one egg. She stopped the boil, so the egg stayed tender. If she had rice, she added a spoon to make it heavier. If she had bread, she tore it in the bowl so it soaked up the hot soup. This was also a sick day meal. It was easy to eat when your stomach was weak. People stopped making simple soups because they think soup must have meat, bags, and real stuff. But this soup did the job. Heat, salt, protein, and comfort. Next is cabbage fry-up, and it smells strong, but it feeds big plates for cheap. Walk into a small kitchen in January 1932 and smell cabbage hit hot fat. The smell is sharp and loud. This meal mattered because cabbage was cheap, tough, and it lasted. Grandma shredded it thin so it cooked fast. She warmed a spoon of fat in a pan, then added cabbage and salt. She kept the heat medium so it browned, not boiled. She did not stir too much. She let it sit so the edges could turn sweet and brown. If she had onion, she added it early. If she had a pinch of sugar, she used it to calm the sharp taste. If she had vinegar, she used one tiny splash at the end to cut the smell. She ate it with bread or potatoes, or she put it over rice. It could fill a plate with almost nothing. People stopped making cabbage like this because they say it smells bad. But that smell meant supper was real. It meant heat in the room. It meant food on the way. This fry-up also used a pan, not a pot, so it felt new. Next is fried apples and onions, and the sweet and sharp mix is the whole surprise. You just watched cabbage turn from cheap into strong with one pan and a little time. Next comes a sweet and salty plate that sounds wrong until you smell it, then a batter dinner that can hide what you don't have. Walk into Grandma's kitchen in September 1931 and smell apples warm in a pan with onions, sweet and sharp at the same time. This meal mattered because it made plain food feel new. Grandma sliced apples thin. She sliced onions thin, too. She warmed a little fat in a pan and added onions first. When they went soft, she added apples. She cooked slow so the onions got brown, not burnt. The apples went soft and shiny. The pan smell filled the room like a small holiday, even on a hard week. Some nights she added a pinch of salt. Some nights she added a tiny bit of sugar. If there was no sugar, the apples were sweet enough. She served it with bread, or next to potatoes, or next to a small piece of meat if there was any. It could be supper or a side. People stopped making mixes like this because they want food to stay in one lane, sweet or salty. But this mix made it taste rich. It also used fruit that was getting soft. It saved waste. Next is applesauce pancakes, and they hide the thin parts in the batter. Walk into a kitchen in March 1935 and hear batter hit a hot pan with a soft sizzle. The smell is warm flour and fruit. This meal mattered because applesauce could stretch what you had. Grandma mixed flour, salt, and a little baking soda if she had it. She added applesauce for wet. If she had an egg, she used one. If not, she made it anyway. Applesauce made the batter sweet without much sugar. It also made the cakes soft, even when the mix was thin. She cooked them small so they flipped easy. She used just enough fat so they did not stick. She stacked them high on a plate so it looked like plenty. That stack mattered. It told kids there was enough, even when there was not. If there was syrup, she used it. If not, she used a sprinkle of sugar, or she ate them plain. People stopped making this because they buy boxed mix now, but boxed mix costs more and teaches nothing. These pancakes were a quiet cheat that worked. Walk into Grandma's kitchen in November 1930 and smell oats cook, warm and plain. The pot thickens fast. This meal mattered because oats were cheap and they held you. Grandma boiled water, or milk if she had it. She poured oats in slow and stirred so it stayed smooth. She cooked it until it got thick enough to stand up on the spoon. Some nights she made it sweet with sugar. Some nights she kept it plain with salt. Either way, it filled bellies with little cost. The smart part was heat and timing. She served it hot right away, so the bowl warmed hands too. If she had a little butter, she stirred it in at the end for shine. If she had cinnamon, she used it. If she had nothing, she served it plain and said, "Eat." People stopped making oatmeal at night because they think it is only for morning. But hunger does not care what time it is. Into a small kitchen in January 1933 and smell onion cook in a pan. The smell is sweet and strong. This meal mattered because it made oats taste like dinner, not like sweet food. Grandma cooked onions first in a tiny bit of fat. She let them get soft and brown at the edges. Then she added water to the pot and stirred oats in. When the oats got thick, she scraped the onions in. The bowl changed right away. It smelled richer. She added salt and pepper if she had it. If she had a spoon of bean broth left from yesterday, she poured it in too. That made it deeper without meat. She ate it hot, slow, and it stuck with her. It also saved money because it used pantry food in a new way. People stop doing this because they think oats must be sweet and onions must go with meat. But this was the point. You use what you have, not what you wish. Walk into Grandma's kitchen in December 1934 and smell milk and rice warm on the stove. Sweet steam fills the room. This meal mattered because it turned small things into comfort. Grandma cooked rice in milk if she had enough. If not, she used water first, then added a little milk at the end. She stirred often so it would not stick. The rice got soft and the pot got thick. She added sugar if there was any. If not, she used a spoon of molasses or nothing. Sometimes she added cinnamon. Sometimes a few raisins if she had them. The key was slow heat. Slow heat made it creamy. It also made the kitchen feel calm. People stopped making rice pudding as supper because they call it dessert. But during hard years, dessert and dinner could be the same bowl. It filled you, warmed you, and made you feel less poor. Walk into a small kitchen in February 1932 and smell warm bread and sweet milk on the stove. The air is soft and wet, like a bakery that forgot it was poor. This meal mattered because it saved old bread and made it feel new. Grandma did not throw stale slices away. She tore them into a bowl with her hands. Hard crust, soft middle, all of it. She warmed milk in a pot and poured it over the bread until it went heavy and dark. If she had one egg, she beat it in. If she did not, she still baked it. She added sugar if there was any. If not, she used a spoon of molasses or nothing at all. Some nights she added cinnamon. Some nights she added a few raisins if she had them. She pressed the bread down so it drank the milk. Then she baked it until the top went brown and the middle set. The smell told you it was done. Kids stopped asking for candy because this tasted like a treat. Grown-ups liked it because it filled you and used scraps. People stopped making it as supper because they call it dessert now, and they buy fresh bread all the time. But this was not dessert. This was a way to turn waste into food. Walk into a small kitchen in June 1933 and hear a pan start to crackle. The air smells like warm fat and beans. This meal mattered because it made cheap beans feel like a real plate. Grandma cooked beans until they were soft. Then she drained them, but she saved the thick bean water. She mashed the beans in a bowl with a fork until they turned into a paste. She added salt and pepper. If she had onion, she chopped it small and mixed it in. If she had flour or crumbs, she added a little to help it hold. Then she shaped the mix into small flat cakes with wet hands. She set them in the pan and did not touch them right away. She let a crust form. That crust was the whole point. It made the patty firm and brown. When she flipped it, it held. She served it with bread or with boiled potatoes. Some nights she poured a little bean liquid over it like gravy. People stopped making bean patties because they think patties must be meat. But these were filling and cheap. Walk into a small kitchen in April 1934 and smell hot rice in a pan. The air is plain, but the sound is loud, a steady sizzle that tells you it will turn crisp. This meal mattered because it used leftover rice and made it feel new. Grandma took cold rice from yesterday and broke it up with her fingers. If she had one egg, she mixed it in. If she did not, she used a spoon of flour or a bit of crumbs to help it stick. She added salt and pepper. If she had onion, she chopped it small and mixed it in so it cooked inside the cake. She shaped the rice into small flat patties and set them in hot fat. She did not flip too soon. She waited for the bottom to go brown so the patty would hold. Then she flipped once and browned the other side. She served them with a little gravy, or with tomato if there was any, or just plain. People stopped making rice patties because rice is now side food. But this was a main dish when money was tight. Walk into Grandma's kitchen in January 1933 and smell potatoes frying. The pan talks in sharp pops, crackling and hissing as the patties hit the hot fat and start to brown. The smell is earthy and rich, the kind of scent that makes your stomach wake up and take notice even if you were not hungry a moment before. This meal mattered because it turned a few potatoes into a full plate. Potatoes were cheap, plentiful, and filling, and when you fried them into patties, they became something that felt intentional and satisfying. not just boiled vegetables thrown on a plate. Grandma boiled potatoes first, then mashed them. She did not need to mash them perfectly smooth. A few lumps were fine, even welcome, because they gave the patties texture. Cold mashed potatoes worked best because they held shape. Fresh, hot mashed potatoes were too soft and would fall apart in the pan, but potatoes that had been cooked the day before and left to sit in the icebox firmed up just enough to be moldable. She added salt and pepper, seasoning generously because potatoes needed it. If she had onion, she mixed it in, chopping it fine so it would distribute evenly and add little bursts of sharpness throughout each bite. If she had flour, she used a small handful to firm it up, binding the mixture together so the patties would not crumble when she flipped them. Some nights she used a little milk, but not much. Too much liquid would make the mixture loose and impossible to shape. She formed thick patties, pressing the mashed potatoes between her palms into flat, even rounds about the size of her hand. She laid them in a hot pan with fat, whatever she had available, bacon grease or lard or a little butter if it was around. She let them sit until the edges turned brown and crisp. That crust was the payoff, the reason for frying instead of just reheating. The outside turned golden and crunchy, almost like a hash brown, while the inside stayed soft and creamy. She did not flip them too soon. Patience was required. If she moved them too early, they would stick and tear. She served them with cabbage, or with beans, or with a spoon of gravy if there was any. The patties were substantial enough to be the main part of the meal, but they also paired well with other simple foods that needed something starchy to balance them out. People stopped making them because they think fried food is bad. They worry about calories and fat content and health in ways that were not concerns in 1933. But back then, fat meant fuel and warmth. These patties were cheap and strong. Walk into a small kitchen in June 1935 and smell fish and onion mix in a bowl. The scent is savory and sharp, cutting through the staleness of the house and making the room feel alive. This meal mattered because one can could feed many. A single tin of salmon, stretched with breadcrumbs and shaped into patties, could become dinner for 4 or 5 people. It was not fresh fish, but it was protein, and protein was precious when money was tight and meat was a luxury most families could not afford. Grandma opened canned salmon and picked out the big bones if she had time. Some people ate the bones because they were soft and full of calcium, but if she was making patties for children or guests, she removed them. Then she flaked the fish with a fork, breaking it into small, even pieces. She added crumbs or flour to stretch it, turning one can into more volume, more patties, more servings. If she had an egg, she used one to bind it, beating it lightly and mixing it through so the patties would hold together when they hit the hot pan. If she did not have an egg, she used more crumbs and pressed harder, packing the mixture tight so it would not fall apart during cooking. She added salt, pepper, and onion if there was onion. The onion gave the patties flavor and moisture, keeping them from being too dry. Then she shaped patties, forming them in her palms into flat, even rounds, and fried them in a hot pan with a little fat. The outside browned fast, turning golden and crispy, and the smell made the house feel like there was real food being cooked, not just leftovers or scraps. She served them with potatoes or with cabbage, something plain that would let the fish be the star. People stopped making them because canned fish feels old and smells strong. They associate it with hardship and deprivation, not with a meal worth eating. But it was cheap protein. It kept people going. It also felt like a treat because it was not beans again. Walk into Grandma's kitchen in September 1932 and hear a tin open with a sharp snap. The smell is salty and strong, fishy and immediate, the kind of smell that fills the room in seconds and lingers long after the meal is done. This meal mattered because it needed no stove. On hot days, that was a gift. When the kitchen was already sweltering and the thought of lighting the oven or standing over a burner was unbearable, a meal that required nothing but a can opener and a plate was a relief. Grandma set crackers on a plate, arranging them in neat rows or just scattering them casually, depending on her mood and how hungry everyone was. She laid sardines on top and used the oil as sauce, letting it soak into the crackers and turn them soft and rich. If there was lemon, she used it, squeezing a few drops over the fish to cut through the saltiness and brighten the flavor, but often there was not. If there was onion, she sliced it thin and laid it over the fish, adding sharpness and crunch. If there was pepper, she used it, shaking it generously over the whole plate. The crackers gave crunch. The fish gave fat and strength, packed with omega-3s and protein that kept the body going even when there was not much else to eat. She might add a cup of tea or a bowl of thin soup on the side, something warm to balance the cold plate and make the meal feel more complete. This was not a fancy dinner. It was not something you would serve to company, but it was food, and it was enough. People stopped eating sardines because they think they are strange. They wrinkle their noses at the smell and the texture, at the tiny bones and the oily skin. But sardines were cheap, and they lasted on a shelf. They also made a small meal feel grown up, like something you might eat in a cafe instead of at a Depression-era kitchen table. Next is tuna and peas over toast, and it turns 2 cans into a hot plate. Walk into a kitchen in February 1934 and smell warm cream and fish. The pan is quiet, but the spoon scraping is steady, a soft rhythm that tells you someone is paying attention, making sure nothing sticks or burns. This meal mattered because it turned cans into comfort. 2 tins from the pantry, a little flour and fat, and suddenly you had something warm and creamy that felt like care had gone into it, even though it came together in minutes. Grandma warmed a simple white sauce with flour, fat, and water or milk. She melted the fat first, then stirred in the flour and let it cook for a minute to take away the raw taste. Then she added liquid slowly, whisking constantly to avoid lumps, until the sauce thickened and turned smooth and glossy. She stirred until it got smooth, adjusting the thickness with more liquid if it was too tight, or a little more flour if it was too thin. Then she added tuna and peas, breaking up the tuna with her spoon and stirring gently so the fish stayed in chunks instead of turning to paste. If peas were canned, she drained them first so they would not water down the sauce. If peas were frozen, she cooked them in the sauce, letting them thaw and warm through. She added pepper, a few good shakes, because pepper gave the dish depth and made it taste less bland. She tasted for salt, but the tuna was already salty, so she went easy, adding just a pinch if it needed it at all. Toast went in the bowl first, torn into pieces or left whole, depending on preference. Then she poured the hot mix over it. The toast soaked it up and made it feel big, substantial, a full meal instead of just a thin sauce. The bread swelled and softened, absorbing the creamy liquid and turning into something that filled the stomach and warmed the chest. People stopped making this because it looks like white food and because they buy boxed meals now. But this was cheap and fast. Next is creamed peas on toast, and it is even simpler. Walk into Grandma's kitchen in May 1931 and smell peas warm in a thick sauce. The scent is mild and comforting, not sharp or aggressive, just the gentle smell of vegetables and cream coming together into something soft and soothing. This meal mattered because it was fast and gentle. When the day had been long and there was no energy left for chopping or stirring or watching a pot for hours, this dish came together quickly and asked for very little. Grandma made a quick white sauce in a pan. Fat and flour first, stirred together over medium heat until they formed a paste and started to smell faintly toasted. Then milk or water, poured in slowly while she whisked, watching the sauce thicken and smooth out. She stirred until smooth, until there were no lumps and the sauce coated the back of her spoon. Then peas went in, dumped straight from the can or scooped from a jar if she had canned them herself in the summer. She kept the heat low so it stayed creamy, so the sauce would not break or curdle or turn grainy. She added pepper and a pinch of salt, tasting as she went to make sure the seasoning was right. If she had onion, she cooked it first for taste, letting it soften in the fat before she added the flour, so the whole sauce carried a hint of sweetness and depth. She poured the peas over toast, warm slices laid flat on a plate or torn into chunks in a bowl. The toast turned soft and warm, and the bowl felt like a full meal, something that could carry you through the evening. This was a meal for nights when there was no energy for big cooking. It required almost no effort, no planning, no skill beyond stirring. People stopped making it because they think peas are a side, not supper. But peas have protein, and the sauce made them filling. Next is creamed corn on toast, and it is sweet in a quiet way. Walk into a kitchen in October 1933 and smell sweet corn warm in a pan. The smell is soft, not sharp, carrying the gentle sweetness of corn mixed with the richness of butter or milk. This meal mattered because corn could make a bowl feel bright in hard times. When everything else was bland and gray, corn brought color and a hint of sweetness, something that felt almost cheerful on a plate that otherwise held very little. Grandma warmed corn and mixed it into a thick white sauce. She made the sauce the same way she always did, fat and flour cooked together, then liquid stirred in slowly until it thickened. If the corn was canned, she saved some liquid to thin the sauce, using the starchy corn water instead of plain water so the flavor stayed concentrated. The corn kernels went in last, stirred gently so they stayed whole and did not turn to mush. If she had pepper, she used it just a little to balance the sweetness. If she had butter, she added a small bit at the end, stirring it in off the heat so it melted and made the sauce glossy. Toast went under it all to soak up the sauce. The toast turned soft and sweet, absorbing the creamy corn mixture and swelling until it was thick and satisfying. Kids liked this one because it tasted less poor. It did not taste like deprivation or making do. It tasted gentle and mild, almost like a treat. Grown-ups liked it because it was quick, because it came together in one pan in under 10 minutes, and because it filled bellies without much fuss or expense. People stopped making it because they think it is odd on toast, and because corn now comes in many forms, frozen and fresh and vacuum-sealed in pouches that promise convenience. But this was simple and cheap, and it worked. Next is macaroni with butter and pepper, and it was a plain plate that still felt like dinner. Walk into Grandma's kitchen in December 1930 and smell pasta steam fill the room. The pot bubbles, sending up clouds of warm, starchy air that fog the windows and make the kitchen feel smaller and warmer than it actually is. This meal mattered because dry noodles were cheap and kept well. A box of macaroni could sit in the cupboard for months without spoiling, waiting patiently for the day when there was nothing else left to cook. Pasta did not need refrigeration. It did not go bad. It just sat there, ready to become dinner whenever you needed it to. Grandma boiled macaroni until it was soft, letting it cook in salted water until the noodles were tender all the way through. She drained it, but saved a little hot water in a cup before she poured the rest down the sink. That water was important. It had starch in it, and starch could help turn fat into sauce. Then she added butter if she had it, dropping a spoonful into the hot noodles and watching it melt instantly, pooling at the bottom of the pot. If she did not have butter, she used a spoon of fat, whatever was in the jar, bacon grease or lard or chicken fat, saved from another meal. She shook in salt and lots of pepper. The pepper made it feel like more. It gave the dish a sharpness, a bite, something that woke up your mouth and made plain noodles taste intentional instead of just empty. She stirred hard so the fat coated every noodle, tossing them until they were slick and shiny. If it was too dry, she added a splash of saved water to make a thin sauce, just enough to help the fat spread and cling. Some nights she added a spoon of canned tomato, stirring it through to give the noodles a little color and sweetness, but often it stayed plain. Plain was enough. Plain was filling. Plain was what you had, and you ate it gratefully because it was hot and it filled the stomach. People stopped making this because they think pasta needs cheese or meat. They think it needs a proper sauce, something rich and complicated. But this plate fed people. It was fast, warm, and cheap. Next is macaroni with tomato, and that one changed the smell of the whole house. Notice the pattern. The cheaper the meal, the more the world tried to shame it out of your mouth. Next, you'll see the exact trick that made stores richer because it didn't just change dinner, it changed what you think dinner should cost. Walk into a small kitchen in March 1933 and smell tomato heat rise from a pot. The air is sharp, sweet, and warm. You hear macaroni rattle in boiling water, then the soft clink of a spoon on the pot. This meal mattered because it turned one plain pantry thing into a full bowl that felt bright. Grandma did not need cheese. She did not need meat. She needed noodles, tomato, salt, and thyme. She boiled the macaroni until it was soft, not fancy, just soft enough to chew. She saved a little hot water before she drained it. Then she warmed tomato in a pan. It could be canned tomato, soup, or a small jar she saved. She did not waste. She stirred it until it smelled less raw. She added salt and pepper if she had it. If she had onion, she cooked it first to make the pot smell deeper. If she had a spoon of fat, she used it to smooth the sharp tomato taste. Then she mixed the macaroni with the tomato and splashed in a bit of saved water to make it slick and saucy. The bowl looked red and plain, but it filled you up fast. Kids liked it because it tasted like real food, not just beans again. Grown-ups liked it because it was cheap and quick. People stopped making it because boxes and frozen meals showed up and acted like noodles must come with cheese and meat. But this plate proved you can make supper from almost nothing. She also used this meal to calm a house down. It cooked fast. It did not take all day. You could make it while a child cried, while the stove warmed the room, while the night felt long. If the sauce was too thin, she let it cook 1 more minute. If it was too thick, she added a splash of the saved water. She tasted it, then tasted it again. She did not guess. She fixed it. And she served it in deep bowls, not flat plates, so it looked like more. She cut bread on the side if there was any. She scraped the pot clean because that last spoonful was tomorrow's start. If there was a bit left, she packed it tight and saved it for lunch. Some nights she ate it standing up. Some nights she ate it quiet. The bowl was warm in her hands. It was not fancy food. It was steady food. It did not ask for praise. It just did its job. Next is noodles with cabbage, and it smells stronger than you expect. Walk into a small kitchen in November 1932 and smell cabbage steam mixed with hot noodles. The air is sharp at first, then soft, like the smell is learning how to calm down. You hear water boil, you hear a knife tap a board, and you hear the pan scrape when the cabbage hits heat. This meal mattered because it used cheap food that lasted. Cabbage could sit for days. Noodles could sit for months. Together they made a full plate without meat. Grandma cut cabbage thin so it cooked fast. She boiled noodles until they were soft, then drained them. She saved a little hot water in a cup. In a pan, she warmed a spoon of fat if she had it. If there was no fat, she used the noodle water to keep it from sticking. She added cabbage and salt and let it cook down. She did not rush it. If the cabbage cooked long, it got sweet at the edges. If it cooked too fast, it stayed loud and bitter. She wanted sweet. Then she tossed the noodles in with the cabbage and stirred until they looked like one meal, not two parts. If it was dry, she added a splash of saved water. If she had pepper, she used it. If she had onion, she cooked it first and let the cabbage pick up the taste. Some nights she added a tiny splash of vinegar at the end, just enough to cut the smell and wake the bowl up. She served it hot in deep bowls, so it looked bigger. People stopped making this because cabbage has a smell and noodles look plain. Also, stores started selling easy meals that cost more and teach less. But this dish was real work food. It filled you, warmed you, and used what you already had. It also stretched a small amount of fat across many bites, which is why it mattered. Next is noodles with beans, and it turns one pot into two meals again. Walk into a small kitchen in February 1934 and smell beans simmer in a pot while noodles boil in another. The air is warm, plain, and safe. You hear two sounds at once, the low blub of beans and the quick rattle of water boiling. This meal mattered because it let one pantry food carry another. Beans gave strength. Noodles gave bulk. Together they made a full bowl that could last. Grandma started the beans early, dry beans, water, and thyme. She kept the heat low so the pot did not burn. If she had onion, she put it in to soften and sweeten. If she had a small spoon of fat, she saved it for later, not at the start. She waited until the beans were soft, because soft beans meant the pot had done its job. Then she boiled noodles. Any noodles worked. Short noodles were easier to stir. Long noodles felt bigger in the bowl. She salted the water if she could, but she did not waste salt. When the noodles were ready, she did not rinse them. She drained them and saved a little hot water in a cup. Now the key step. She did not serve beans and noodles side by side. She mixed them. She poured beans over noodles so the noodles drank the bean broth. That broth was not extra. It was the sauce. If it looked too thin, she mashed a few beans with a spoon to thicken it. If it looked too thick, she added a splash of the saved noodle water. She stirred until it turned glossy and smooth. She served it in deep bowls so it looked like more. If she had pepper, she used it. If she had vinegar, she used one tiny splash at the end to cut the heavy taste. If she had bread, she used it to wipe the bowl clean, because wasted broth was wasted money. People stopped making meals like this because they think it is boring and too poor. But it was smart. It used two cheap foods and made them taste like one full meal. Next is dumplings in broth, and the dough is the real trick. Walk into a small kitchen in January 1932 and hear broth whisper on the stove. The sound is soft and steady, a gentle simmer that has been going long enough to warm the whole room. The air smells like hot salt water and flour, simple and clean, the kind of smell that promises warmth even if it does not promise much else. This meal mattered because it made a pot feel full even when the pantry was thin. A small amount of broth could stretch into a full meal once you added dumplings, those soft, doughy clouds that soaked up liquid and turned into something substantial. Grandma did not need meat to make it work. She needed heat and dough, and she had both. She started with broth. Sometimes it was water with salt, nothing more than that, just enough to give the liquid flavor and make it taste like something intentional. Sometimes it was saved soup from yesterday, the last few cups of vegetable broth or bean water that had been sitting in a jar. Sometimes it was bone water, if there had been a bone, simmered until every bit of flavor had leached out into the liquid. She kept it at a gentle bubble, not a hard boil, because a hard boil can break dumplings apart. They needed calm heat, steady and patient, so they could cook through without falling to pieces. Then she made dough in a bowl. Flour, a pinch of salt, and water or milk if she had it. Milk made the dumplings softer and richer, but water worked just fine when milk was not available. She stirred with a spoon until it turned thick, heavy enough to hold together, but not so stiff that it would not drop from the spoon. If it was too wet, she added flour, a little at a time. If it was too dry, she added drops of water until it loosened. The dough should be soft, not sticky like glue. She let it sit for a minute so it could settle, the flour absorbing the liquid fully. Now the key. She did not roll it thin. She dropped it. She used a spoon and let small lumps fall into the broth, one after another, spacing them out so they had room to expand. Each piece sank, then rose, bobbing back to the surface as it cooked. The pot changed right away. The broth turned cloudy and thicker as the dumplings released starch into the liquid. The dumplings grew and got soft, swelling to twice their original size. She stirred once or twice so they did not stick to the bottom. But not too much. Too much stirring would break them. She served it hot in deep bowls. It filled the stomach fast, warm and heavy and comforting. People stopped making it because they think dumplings are hard. But these were the easiest kind. Next is drop biscuits and gravy, and the gravy is the loud part. Walk into Grandma's kitchen in October 1933 and smell flour and hot fat meat in a pan. The scent is warm and toasted, slightly nutty, the kind of smell that tells you something good is being built from almost nothing. You hear a spoon tap a bowl, the rhythmic sound of someone working quickly and efficiently, no wasted motion. This meal mattered because it could turn a few simple things into a full plate that felt rich. Flour, fat, water, and heat became biscuits. Fat, flour, and liquid became gravy. Together they were comfort, substance, and the feeling of having been fed something that mattered, even when there was very little money and even less time. Grandma made drop biscuits because rolling and cutting took time and tools. She did not have a rolling pin, or if she did not want to clean it. She did not have biscuit cutters, and she did not want to waste scraps from re-rolling the dough. Drop biscuits were faster, simpler, and just as filling. She mixed flour, salt, and a little baking powder if she had it. If she did not, she still made them, just heavier. They would not rise as high, but they would still bake and still fill the stomach. She cut fat into the flour with her hands, rubbing it between her fingers until it looked like coarse crumbs, little pebbles of fat coated in flour. Then she poured in water or milk and stirred just enough to bring it together. She did not knead it. Kneading made biscuits tough. She dropped rough lumps onto a pan, uneven and rustic, and baked them until the tops were firm and lightly golden. While they baked, she made gravy. Fat in a pan, heated until it shimmered. Flour stirred in until it smelled toasted, nutty, and deep. The raw flour taste cooked out completely. Then liquid poured in slow while she stirred fast, breaking up any lumps and coaxing the mixture into a smooth, thick sauce. The gravy turned from pale to creamy, coating the back of the spoon. Pepper went in if she had it, adding a bite that cut through the richness. Salt only if needed, because fat could be salty, especially if it came from bacon or salt pork. She split biscuits and poured gravy over them. The biscuit drank it and became a full meal, soft and heavy and satisfying. The gravy sank into every crevice, turning dry bread into something luscious and filling. People stopped making it because they buy packets now, but packets cost more and taste flat. Next 5 meals get louder, and one of them turns beans into a whole week. After 45. Convenience tried to make you feel too good for flour, fat, and a hot pan, so you'd pay more for less food. Next, you'll see how the same pantry can make meals that feel bigger than the week. Walk into a small kitchen in February 1934 and hear beans breathe on the stove. The pot makes a slow blub sound, steady and rhythmic, the kind of sound that has been going for hours and will keep going until the beans are soft. In the other pan, hot fat pops, crackling and spitting as it heats up and prepares to receive the cornbread batter. The air smells like salt, corn, and smoke, earthy and warm and deeply satisfying. This meal mattered because it was 2 cheap foods that became one strong plate. Beans filled you, gave you protein and weight and something that stuck to your ribs. Cornbread filled the gaps, soaked up the broth, gave you something to chew and taste and feel between your teeth. Together they could cover a whole day, breakfast or dinner or both if you made enough. Grandma started beans early. Dry beans and water, low heat, long time. There was no rushing beans. They needed hours to soften and become edible, so she put them on in the morning or even the night before if she thought ahead. If she had onion, she used it, dropping it in whole or chopped to sweeten the pot. If she had a bone, a ham bone, or a piece of salt pork with some meat still clinging to it, she used it, letting it simmer until the flavor leached out into the liquid. If not, she still made it work with salt and patience. She saved the thick bean water because that was the sauce, the part that carried flavor and made the meal feel complete. Then she made cornbread in a skillet, not a big oven dish. Skillet meant faster and a better crust. The heat came from below, direct and intense, and it gave the bottom of the cornbread a golden, crunchy crust that you could not get in a slow oven. She heated a pan with a spoon of fat until it was hot, letting it melt and coat the surface completely. In a bowl, she mixed cornmeal, salt, and water. If she had milk, she used it because it made the bread softer and richer. If she had an egg, she used one to help it hold together. If she had nothing, she still baked it because cornmeal and water and heat were enough. She poured the batter into the hot pan, and it hissed right away. That hiss was the sign. It meant crust, meant the bread was already starting to cook, and brown before it even fully settled into the pan. She cooked it until the bottom went brown and firm. The top set, no longer liquid but solid enough to cut. She cut wedges and served them with beans. Some nights she broke cornbread into the bean bowl so it drank the broth and got thick. Some nights she kept it on the side so the crust stayed crisp. People stopped making this because they think beans take too long and cornbread is extra. But this was not extra. It was the plan. It was cheap power. Next is pancakes with syrup supper, and it was a sweet trick on a hard week. Walk into a small kitchen in May 1933 and smell batter cook on a hot pan. The air is warm and sweet, carrying that soft, toasted scent of flour, turning golden and edges crisping just slightly. You hear the first pour, then the soft sizzle, then the quiet pop when bubbles rise through the batter and break on the surface. This meal mattered because pancakes could turn a hard night into a softer one. When there was not much in the pantry, flour could still become food. Flour and water and heat were sometimes all you needed to put something warm and filling on the table, something that felt like comfort even when the day had been difficult and the cupboard was nearly bare. Grandma mixed flour, salt, and a little baking powder if she had it. If she did not, she used a tiny bit of soda, or nothing at all, and made them flat. Flat pancakes were still pancakes. They still filled the stomach. She added water or milk if there was milk. Milk made them richer and softer, but water worked just fine when milk was not an option. If there was one egg, she used it, beating it in to give the batter structure and a little lift. If not, she still made them. The batter was not fancy. She did not stir it forever, overworking it until it turned tough. She stirred just enough so it came together, leaving it a little lumpy because lumps disappeared in the heat. She greased the pan with a small swipe of fat, running a piece of cloth or paper across the surface so the pancakes would not stick. She poured small circles so they cooked fast, each one no bigger than her palm. When bubbles showed up on top, little craters that popped and stayed open, she flipped once. She did not press them down. Pressing squeezed out the air and made them dense. She stacked them high on a plate because stacks look like plenty. That stack was part of the meal. It looked generous. It looked like there was enough, even when there was barely enough. If there was syrup, she used it, pouring it over the top so it ran down the sides and pooled on the plate. If not, she used sugar dissolved in a little hot water, or molasses thinned out, or even just warm water with a bit of sugar stirred in. Some nights she put butter on top. Some nights she did not. People stopped doing pancake supper because they think pancakes are only for breakfast, but a hot stack at night could calm a room. Next is potato hash with no meat, and the pan gets louder. Walk into Grandma's kitchen in January 1932 and hear potatoes hit a hot pan. The sound is sharp, immediate, a sizzle that cuts through the cold morning air and tells you breakfast or dinner or whatever meal this is going to be is already underway. The smell is onion, salt, and hot fat, simple and honest, and enough to make your stomach wake up and pay attention. This meal mattered because it made a few potatoes feel like a full plate. No meat needed, no embellishment required, just potatoes cooked right, and suddenly you had something worth eating, something that felt substantial and satisfying even though it cost almost nothing. Grandma diced potatoes small so they cooked faster. Large chunks would take too long and burn on the outside before the inside softened, so she kept them uniform and bite-sized. She used onion if she had it, because onion makes plain food smell rich. Even a small onion, chopped fine and scattered through the potatoes, could transform the whole pan and make it taste like something more deliberate, more cared for. She warmed a spoon of fat in a pan, whatever she had, lard or bacon, grease or butter if there was any. Then potatoes went in. She spread them out flat and let them sit. She did not stir too much. Browning needs still time. The potatoes had to rest against the hot surface long enough to develop color and crust, that deep golden brown that brought out sweetness and added texture. After the bottom browned, she flipped and browned the other side, working in sections, so each piece got its turn against the heat. If the pan was too dry, she added a tiny splash of water and put a lid on for 1 minute to soften the middle. The steam helped the potatoes cook through without adding more fat, which she could not afford to waste. Then she took the lid off to crisp again, letting the moisture evaporate and the surface turn back to golden and crunchy. Salt and pepper if she had them, shaken over the top while the hash was still hot so the seasoning stuck. If she had leftover beans, she might stir in a spoon at the end, warming them through and adding a little protein to stretch the meal further. If she had nothing else, she served it as is, straight from the pan onto the plate. People stopped making simple hash because they think it is just potatoes. They see it as boring, as something you eat only when there is nothing better available. But the brown taste is the point. The caramelization, the crisp edges, the way the onions sweeten and the salt brings everything together, that is what makes it good. It is cheap, strong, and hot. Next is potato hash with bits of meat, and those bits change the whole story. Walk into a small kitchen in October 1934 and smell potatoes fry with tiny bits of meat. The smell is deeper than plain hash, richer and more complex, carrying the scent of fat rendering and meat browning and onions turning golden at the edges. You hear the pan crackle like paper, that sharp sizzling sound that tells you the heat is high enough and the food is crisping properly. This meal mattered because scraps became supper. Things that might have been tossed or fed to the dog were instead transformed into something that could feed a family, something that filled bellies and felt like a real dinner, even though it came from the odds and ends of the week. Grandma did not use big cuts of meat. She used the end pieces, the small bits, the trimmings left after Sunday's roast, or the scraps from trimming a piece of pork. She chopped them small, into pieces no bigger than a thumbnail, so they would cook quickly and spread evenly through the hash. She cooked them first so the pan got flavor, letting the meat brown and release its fat into the bottom of the skillet where it would coat everything else that came after. Then she added diced potatoes and onion, cut into small cubes so they would cook through without burning on the outside. She spread everything out across the pan and let it brown, resisting the urge to stir too often because stirring prevented crisping. The trick was timing. If the meat cooked too long, it got hard, turning chewy and tough and unpleasant to eat. So she browned it fast, just enough to get color and flavor, then let potatoes do the long work. The potatoes needed more time to soften and crisp, so they stayed in the pan longer, cooking slowly until they were tender inside and golden outside. If the potatoes needed help, she added a small splash of water and covered the pan for a minute, trapping the steam so they would cook through faster, then uncovered it again to crisp the surface and drive off the moisture. She served it hot, straight from the pan, spooning it onto plates while it was still sizzling. It filled you up, and it also made the house smell like real meat, even when there was not much. The smell alone was satisfying. A reminder that there was still flavor in the house, still something worth sitting down for. People stop doing this because they buy meat in neat packs now and throw scraps away. But scraps used to be planned. Next is everything soup, and it is where leftovers go to hide. Walk into Grandma's kitchen in February 1935 and smell a pot that does not have one name. It smells like onion, starch, and yesterday. You hear a low simmer and a spoon scraping the bottom. The sound is steady and patient, the kind of rhythm that tells you someone has been standing there a long time, watching over something that matters. This meal mattered because it saved waste and turned it into one more day. It was not fancy. It was not planned. But it was the difference between hunger and fullness when there was nothing else left to give. Grandma started with water, and whatever broth was left from the night before, maybe from boiled chicken bones, or the liquid drained off from yesterday's vegetables. Then she added leftovers, a bit of potato that had gone soft in the icebox, a spoon of beans that sat alone in a jar, a handful of noodles from Sunday dinner, a few cabbage leaves that were wilting but not yet spoiled, even a piece of bread torn small to thicken it because bread that was too hard to chew could still do work in a pot. She did not care if it matched. She cared if it fed people. She cared if it stretched one more meal out of things that others might have thrown away. She kept it at a gentle bubble so it would not break down too fast. The heat had to be low and steady, coaxing flavor out of scraps without turning them to mush. She tasted it often, dipping the same wooden spoon into the broth and bringing it to her lips with a careful blow to cool it. If it was flat, she added salt. If it was too salty, she added more water and more starch to balance it back out. If it was thin, she mashed a few bits in the pot to thicken it, pressing them against the side with the back of her spoon until they gave in and dissolved into the broth. The soup changed as it cooked. That was normal. It was supposed to change. It was supposed to adapt to what was in the house and what the family needed that day. This was not a recipe you could write down. It was a practice. It was a way of thinking that said nothing goes to waste, not when people are still hungry. Grandma did not measure. She did not worry about presentation. She worried about whether there would be enough to go around and whether the children would go to bed with something warm in their stomachs. The pot sat on the stove for hours, sometimes all day, and people ate from it when they came in from the cold. People stopped making everything soup because they fear leftovers and want meals to look perfect. They want recipes with exact measurements and pictures that match. But this pot was the reason some families made it through the Depression. It was survival dressed up as dinner, and it worked. Next is clean out rice, and it turns scraps into a full bowl again. These meals were not sad, they were smart. Modern, easy food costs more, wastes more, and teaches less. Next you'll see how the same pantry makes food that looks new every night. Walk into a small kitchen in March 1934 and smell plain rice. Steam rise like a blank page. The pot is quiet, but the room feels busy. You can hear scraping sounds, the clink of a spoon against a jar, the sound of someone moving quickly because there is not much time and dinner needs to happen now. This meal mattered because rice could hold anything and make it feel like dinner. Rice was neutral. It did not judge. It did not clash. It sat there white and ready, willing to accept whatever you put on top of it and turn it into something that could be called a meal. Grandma cooked rice in water with a pinch of salt. She did not waste. She measured the water carefully, just enough to cook the rice through without leaving too much liquid at the bottom that would have to be drained and thrown away. She kept the lid on so the heat stayed in, so the steam did the work and nothing escaped. Rice was cheap, but it still mattered. You did not cook more than you needed, and you did not let it burn or dry out. Then she looked for scraps. A spoon of beans left in a bowl from last night. A bit of cabbage that had been cooked earlier in the week and sat in the icebox going soft. A few noodles from Sunday dinner. A small piece of meat, if there was any, torn into shreds so it would go further. Even thick soup from yesterday that had reduced down to almost nothing. She warmed the scraps in a pan or in a small pot, bringing them back to life with a little heat. She did not try to match them, she just made them hot. The point was not elegance. The point was using what was there before it spoiled. Then she built the bowl. Rice first, big and white, spooned into the bottom so it formed a base that could carry weight. Then the scraps on top, poured or spooned over the rice so they spread across the surface and sank into the grains. The rice drank the sauce and made it feel like more food than it was. One spoonful of beans became 3 bites when it was stretched over rice. A thin broth turned into something substantial when the rice soaked it up and swelled. If the scraps were dry, she added a splash of water and salt, just enough to create a little sauce so the rice would not be too plain. If the scraps were thin, she mashed a few bits to thicken them, pressing them with the spoon until they broke down and gave the liquid body. If the scraps were too salty, she added more rice. Rice fixed problems. It balanced. It stretched. It absorbed. People stop doing this because they want real meals with one name and one look. They want dishes that can be written down and repeated exactly. Walk into Grandma's kitchen in October 1933 and smell beans simmer like a steady engine. The pot sits on the back of the stove, bubbling gently, sending up steam that smells earthy and thick and constant. This meal mattered because beans could swallow leftovers and make them last. Beans were patient. They did not complain when you added something strange. They did not fall apart when you stirred in scraps from yesterday or the day before. They just kept cooking absorbing whatever you gave them, stretching a little further each time something new went into the pot. Grandma cooked dry beans slow. She soaked them overnight if she remembered, or she started them early in the morning and let them cook all day if she did not. She kept the heat low so nothing burned, just a soft simmer that kept the beans moving without boiling them into mush. She salted late, not early, because salt added too soon would toughen the skins and keep the beans from softening properly. Patience was the only ingredient that mattered at this stage. You could not rush beans. You just had to wait. When the beans were soft, she used the pot like a basket. She added small scraps right into it, things that were too little to serve on their own but too good to throw away. Bits of potato left over from yesterday's dinner, a handful of rice that had dried out in the bowl, a few cabbage leaves that were wilting but not spoiled, a spoon of tomato from the bottom of a jar, even bread torn small to thicken the broth and give it more body. She stirred and let it simmer again so the flavors joined, so the beans had time to soften the vegetables and pull everything together into something that tasted unified instead of like a collection of odds and ends. The trick was balance. If it got too thick, she added water, just enough to loosen it back into soup instead of stew. If it got too thin, she mashed beans on the side of the pot, pressing them against the metal with the back of her spoon until they broke down and dissolved into the liquid, thickening it naturally without needing flour or starch. If it tasted flat, she added salt or onion if she had it, cooking the onion down until it sweetened and gave the pot depth. The pot changed each day, but it still counted as dinner. Some days it was thicker. Some days it was thinner. Some days it tasted more like tomato. Other days more like cabbage. But it was always there, always ready, always enough. People stopped making meals like this because they fear leftovers and want clean, perfect food. They want meals that look the same every time, that follow a recipe that can be photographed and named. But perfect food costs more. This pot kept families steady. It turned scraps into strength, waste into warmth, and nothing into something. Next is fried rice with no meat, and it makes leftovers taste new in a pan. Walk into a kitchen in January 1935 and hear rice hit a hot pan. The sound is fast and loud, a sharp sizzle that tells you the pan is hot enough and the rice is starting to work. This meal mattered because it turned cold rice into a new dinner. Rice that had sat since yesterday, hard and clumped together in a bowl, could be brought back to life with heat and fat and a little bit of attention. It was not just reheating, it was transforming. It was taking something that looked finished and finding another meal inside it. Grandma used day-old rice because it was dry and did not turn mushy. Fresh rice had too much moisture. It would stick to the pan and clump together into a gummy mass that could not crisp or separate properly. But rice that had been cooked and left to cool, rice that had dried out just enough to firm up, that rice was perfect for frying. She broke it up with her fingers before it went into the pan, pressing apart the clumps and loosening the grains so they would cook evenly and not stick together in hard lumps. She heated a pan with a small spoon of fat, just enough to coat the bottom and keep the rice from sticking. The fat had to be hot before anything else went in, or the rice would absorb it and turn greasy instead of crisp. If she had onion, she cooked it first, letting it soften and brown slightly so it sweetened and added depth to the dish. If she had cabbage, she sliced it thin and added it next, stirring it until it wilted and started to char at the edges. If she had any leftover veg, carrots or peas or green beans from another meal, she used it, chopping it small so it would heat through quickly and blend into the rice instead of sitting in separate chunks. Then rice went in. She spread it out across the pan in an even layer and let it sit so it could brown. This was important. If she stirred it too much, it would never get crispy. She had to leave it alone, let it toast on the bottom, and only then flip it and stir to brown another side. She added salt and pepper if she had them, shaking them in while the rice was still hot so the seasoning would stick. If she had a spoon of bean broth or tomato, she splashed it in for taste, but not too much. The goal was dry, hot, and a little crisp. Too much liquid would turn it back into soft rice, and that defeated the purpose. She stirred just enough to keep it from burning, checking the bottom of the pan and scraping up the browned bits that stuck. People stopped making this because they think fried rice must have meat or special sauce. They think it needs soy sauce and scrambled egg and char siu pork to be legitimate, but it started as a leftovers meal. It was fast, hot, and cheap, a way to use what was already cooked and turn it into something that tasted different enough to feel new. Next is fried rice with egg, and that one made the pan feel rich. Walk into Grandma's kitchen in April 1932 and smell rice toast in a pan. Then you smell egg, warm and clean, cracking into the hot fat and sizzling as it hits the surface. This meal mattered because one egg could change a whole pot. A single egg, stretched thin and scrambled through a pan of rice, could turn leftovers into something that felt fresh and intentional. It could make yesterday's plain boiled rice taste like a meal someone had decided to cook, not just something reheated because there was nothing else. The egg brought richness and color and protein, and it made the dish feel complete. Grandma heated fat in a pan, whatever she had on hand, bacon grease or lard or a little butter if it was available, and let it get hot enough to shimmer before she added anything else. Then she added cold rice that had been cooked the day before and left to sit in the icebox or on the back of the stove, where it firmed up and dried out just enough to fry properly. Fresh rice would have turned to mush, but cold rice held its shape and toasted in the fat, each grain separating and crisping slightly at the edges. She let it brown a little, stirring occasionally but not constantly, giving it time to develop flavor and texture. Then she pushed the rice to one side and cracked in an egg. She scrambled it fast in the open space, breaking the yolk with the edge of her spatula and stirring it quickly so it cooked in small, soft curds before it had a chance to set into one solid mass. Then she mixed it through the rice so small bits of egg spread everywhere, coating the grains and turning the whole pan a pale yellow. That made one egg feel like many bites. Every spoonful had a little egg in it, enough to taste it, enough to feel like the meal had substance. If she had onion, she used it, chopping it fine and adding it early so it softened and sweetened in the fat before the rice went in. If she had peas, she used them, stirring them in at the end so they warmed through but did not overcook. If she had nothing, she still had rice and egg. Salt and pepper, that was enough. The pan did the rest, transforming simple ingredients through heat and fat and a little bit of patience into something that tasted purposeful and satisfying. This was a meal that came together in minutes. It required no recipe, no planning, no special equipment. Just a hot pan, a bit of fat, leftover rice, and an egg if you were lucky enough to have one. It was the kind of dish you made when you were tired and hungry and needed something fast that would still feel like real food. People stopped making this because eggs cost more now, and folks forget eggs can be supper. They think of eggs as breakfast food, not something that belongs in a dinner pan. But this meal was quick, warm, and strong. Next is onion and potato bake, and it smells like a full house even when it's just two things. Walk into a small kitchen in November 1931 and smell onions soften in heat while potatoes bake. The smell is sweet, warm, and slow, the kind of aroma that builds gradually and fills every corner of the house until you can taste it in the air before you even sit down to eat. This meal mattered because it used cheap roots and turned them into a full pan. Potatoes and onions were the vegetables that lasted through winter, stored in basements and root cellars where they stayed cool and dark. They were reliable when almost nothing else was, and together they made something that felt substantial and comforting, something worth waiting for. Grandma sliced potatoes thin so they cooked through, using a sharp knife and a steady hand to make each slice as even as she could manage. Thick slices would stay hard in the center while the edges burned, so thin was better, even if it took longer to cut. She sliced onions thin, too, letting them fall into rings that would soften and almost disappear into the layers as they cooked. She layered them in a dish or pan, alternating potatoes and onions, sprinkling salt between layers, maybe pepper if she had it. The salt was important. It drew out moisture from the vegetables and helped them cook down into something tender and unified instead of just sitting in separate dry layers. If she had a spoon of fat, she dotted it on top, little bits of butter or lard or bacon grease scattered across the surface so they would melt and run down between the layers, adding richness and helping the top brown. If she had no fat, she used a little water and kept it covered so it steamed first, trapping the heat and moisture inside until the vegetables were soft enough to finish uncovered. She baked it until the potatoes turned soft and the top got brown at the edges, checking it once or twice to make sure it was not drying out or burning. The onions melted into the layers and made the whole pan taste deeper than it should, their sweetness spreading through every bite and turning plain potatoes into something that felt deliberate and cared for. It was not fancy, but it felt like a real dinner because it came out of the oven hot and ready. There was something about a baked dish that carried weight, that said this meal had been planned and watched over. It was not thrown together at the last minute. It had been given time. The pan came to the table still bubbling at the edges, and people ate straight from it, scooping portions onto their plates while it was still too hot to taste properly, but too good to wait for. People stopped baking simple pans like this because they think dinner needs many parts. They want a protein, a starch, a vegetable, all separate and plated. But this was 2 parts, and it worked. It fed people. It filled them. It made them feel like they had eaten a meal that mattered. Next is baked beans and bread, and it turns pantry food into a heavy plate. Notice what easy food did. It didn't just raise prices, it broke the skill of using scraps. Next 5 dishes show how families made the same pantry feel like new meals, and what it cost when that ended. Walk into Grandma's kitchen in February 1933 and smell beans bake until thick. The air is sweet and salty, rich with the smell of sugar caramelizing at the edges of the pan and the deep earthy scent of beans that have been cooking long enough to become something more than they started as. This meal mattered because it made canned or cooked beans feel bigger. Beans on their own were cheap and plain, but baked beans, cooked low and slow until the sauce thickened and the top turned dark and glossy, felt like a dish someone had put thought into. It felt like Sunday dinner even when it was just Tuesday and there was nothing else in the house. Grandma poured beans into a dish, usually a heavy ceramic baking pan that could take the heat and hold it long after the oven was turned off. If they were plain, she added a little sugar or molasses, just enough to give them sweetness without turning them into candy. The molasses was dark and thick, and it mixed into the beans slowly, turning the liquid a deeper brown and adding a richness that made the whole dish taste more complex. If she had onion, she added it, chopped small, and stirred in raw so it would soften and sweeten as it baked. If she had a bit of fat, maybe bacon grease or a small piece of salt pork, she used it for taste, letting it melt into the beans and coat every spoonful with a hint of smoke and salt. Then she baked them until the top got dark and sticky, the sauce bubbling up around the edges and reducing down until it clung to the beans instead of pooling at the bottom of the dish. The top layer turned almost crusty, concentrated and intense, while the beans underneath stayed soft and tender. The baking transformed them. It made them feel like more than something poured from a can or soaked overnight. It made them feel deliberate. Bread was the partner. She served thick slices on the side, sometimes toasted if the oven was still warm, sometimes plain if there was no time or no need. Or she tore bread and pushed it into the beans so it drank the sauce, soaking up the sweet, salty liquid until it swelled and softened. That made the bowl heavy and filling. The bread stretched the beans further, turned one serving into two, and made sure no one left the table still hungry. It was practical, but it also tasted good, the soft bread mixing with the thick sauce and the creamy beans. People stop doing this because they buy small side dishes now instead of big pans. Beans come in single-serve cups, or small cans meant for one meal. But big pans meant leftovers, and leftovers meant money saved. It meant cooking once and eating twice, maybe 3 times if the family was small. Next is stewed tomatoes and bread, and it tastes sharp, but it warms you fast. Walk into a small kitchen in September 1932 and smell tomatoes simmer, sharp and bright. The pot is red, bubbling gently on the stove, and the smell cuts through the staleness of the house like something alive. This meal mattered because tomatoes could wake up a plain day. They brought color and tang and a sense of richness to a table that had seen too many bowls of gray and brown. Tomatoes tasted like summer, even when they came from a can, and they made you feel like you were eating something with life in it, not just fuel to get through the afternoon. Grandma heated canned tomatoes or tomato soup, whichever she had on hand or whichever had been cheaper at the store. She added salt and pepper if she had them, shaking them in with a practiced hand that knew how much was enough without measuring. If she had onion, she simmered it in first, letting it soften and sweeten in a little fat, or just in the moisture from the tomatoes themselves. The onion mellowed the sharpness of the tomato and gave the dish a base that felt more complete, more cooked, more like a meal someone had thought about. Then she tore bread into a bowl and poured hot tomatoes over it. The bread had to be torn, not cut, because tearing gave it rough edges that soaked up the liquid better. She used whatever bread was around, usually something a day or 2 old that had started to harden, because fresh bread would have dissolved too quickly into mush. The bread went soft and thick like quick dumplings, swelling up as it absorbed the tomato broth. It filled the bowl and made the tomato feel like a meal, not a drink. Without the bread, the tomatoes were just soup, thin and not quite enough. With the bread, it became something you could eat with a spoon and feel full afterward. If it was too sharp, she added a splash of milk if she had it, just enough to soften the acid and turn the broth a lighter shade of red. The milk made it creamier, gentler on the stomach, easier for children to eat without complaining. If she had no milk, she just ate it and warmed up anyway. The point was not perfection. The point was eating something hot that tasted like more than nothing. This dish came together in minutes. It required no skill, no planning, no rare ingredients. It was the kind of meal you made when you came in, tired and cold, and needed something fast that would still feel like you had been fed. It was humble, but it was honest, and it did what it needed to do. People stopped making this because they think bread and soup is strange. They see it as desperation food, something only eaten when there is no other option. But it was a smart fix for hunger, quick and warm and satisfying in its own plain way. Next is cabbage rolls with rice only, and they look fancy even when they are not. Walk into Grandma's kitchen in January 1934 and smell cabbage leaves steam in a pot. The air is thick and slightly sweet, with that earthy vegetable smell that fills the whole house and clings to the curtains. This meal mattered because it looked like real cooking even when meat was missing. It had structure. It had effort written into it. When you set a plate of cabbage rolls on the table, it did not look like poverty. It looked like someone cared enough to take the time to make something proper, even when there was almost nothing to work with. Grandma softened cabbage leaves in hot water, peeling them carefully from the head one at a time and lowering them into the boiling pot until they turned pliable and bright green. She had to be gentle or they would tear, and a torn leaf meant starting over or patching it together as best she could. Then she filled them with cooked rice, plain white rice that had been boiled until it was sticky enough to hold together, but not so soft that it turned to mush. If she had onion, she mixed it into the rice, chopping it fine so it would cook through and sweeten as the rolls simmered. If she had tomato, she poured it over the rolls, either from a jar she had canned in the fall, or from a tin if there was money for it. The tomato gave the dish color and a little acid to balance the starchiness of the rice and the mildness of the cabbage. She wrapped the leaves tight so the rolls held shape, folding the sides in first and then rolling from the bottom up, tucking the edge under so it would not unravel in the pot. Each roll had to be snug, or the rice would spill out and the whole thing would fall apart. Then she simmered them until the cabbage went tender and the rice stayed firm, layering the rolls carefully in the pot so they would not crush each other under their own weight. She added just enough liquid to cover them, sometimes water, sometimes broth if there was any, and let them cook low and slow until everything melted together. The rolls felt special because they had shape. A shaped meal feels planned. It feels intentional. That mattered in hard times, when so much of life felt like chaos and scrambling and making do with whatever was left. A plate of cabbage rolls said that someone had taken the time to think, to measure, to fold with care. It said that the family still deserved something more than a bowl of loose scraps thrown together. People stopped making these because rolling takes time. It is repetitive and requires patience, and modern life does not reward patience the way it used to. But time was cheaper than money in 1934, and hands were free even when wallets were empty. Next is salt pork and potatoes, and it shows how one salty piece could flavor a whole pot. If you had salt pork, walk into a small kitchen in March 1935 and smell salt and fat warm in a pot. The scent is sharp and heavy, filling the room with the unmistakable aroma of pork fat rendering down into something that will carry flavor through an entire meal. This meal mattered because one small piece could flavor many potatoes. A single strip of salt pork no bigger than your palm could turn a pot of plain potatoes into something that tasted rich and satisfying. It was not about the meat itself. It was about what the meat could do for everything else in the pot. Grandma cut salt pork into small bits and cooked it first, letting the cubes sizzle and brown in the bottom of the pot until the fat melted out and pooled around them. The pot got greasy and smelled strong, the kind of smell that made your mouth water even though you knew there was not much meat to go around. Then she added potatoes and water, enough to cover them, but not so much that the flavor would be lost. The potatoes cooked in that salty fat and turned into real food fast. They absorbed the richness from the pork, soaking it up as they softened, and every bite carried the taste of something more substantial than just a plain boiled potato. She did not need much else. The salt pork did the work. If she had onion, she added it early, letting it cook down with the pork so it sweetened and deepened the broth. If she had pepper, she used it, a few shakes to cut through the heaviness of the fat and give the dish a little bite. She tasted before adding salt because salt pork already carried salt, sometimes more than you wanted. If she added too much, the whole pot would be ruined, too harsh to eat. So she went slow, tasting as she cooked, adjusting with water if it got too strong. This was a meal that stretched ingredients as far as they could go. The potatoes were cheap and filling. The salt pork was preserved, which meant it kept for months without spoiling. and a little bit lasted a long time. Families who could not afford fresh meat relied on salt pork because it was stable and because it gave them something that tasted like abundance even when there was very little in the cupboard. People stopped making this because salt pork is not common now and because people fear salty food. They worry about health and sodium and things that were not worries in 1935. But this dish was a way to make cheap potatoes taste like meat. It was a way to feed a family on almost nothing and make them feel like they had eaten something real. It was survival cooked low and slow, and it kept people alive. Next is cornbread and milk bowl, and it sounds too simple until you try it hot. Walk into Grandma's kitchen in December 1931 and smell cornbread warm on a plate. The milk is cold, poured straight from the bottle that sat in the icebox or the pail that came in from the barn that morning. This meal mattered because it was fast comfort from two cheap things. It did not need a stove once the cornbread was baked. It did not need planning or skill. It just needed hands to crumble and a spoon to eat with. When the day had been long and the cupboard was nearly bare, this bowl was enough. Grandma crumbled cornbread into a bowl with her hands, breaking it into uneven pieces that ranged from large chunks to fine crumbs. She did not worry about making it look neat. She poured milk over it slowly, letting it seep into every crack and corner of the bread, watching it soften and swell. Then she added a pinch of salt, or sugar if there was sugar. The salt brought out the flavor of the cornmeal and made the milk taste richer. The sugar, when it was there, turned the bowl into something that felt like dessert, even though it was supper. The bread soaked up the milk and turned soft, releasing its grainy sweetness into the liquid. It filled the stomach and warmed the mind. It was simple, but it was satisfying in a way that only warm, soft food can be when you are tired and hungry. If the cornbread was stale, this was even better, because it drank more milk without falling apart too quickly. Day-old cornbread had a firmness that held up under the weight of the liquid, absorbing it slowly and completely. If there was no milk, she used warm water and a little fat, maybe bacon grease or a spoonful of butter, to give it richness. The point was to make a bowl that did not cost much and did not take long. Cornmeal was cheap. Milk, if you had a cow or a neighbor with one, was available. This was a meal you could put together in under 2 minutes, and it would carry you through the night. Some families ate this for breakfast. Some ate it for supper. Some ate it in between when there was nothing else and no time to cook. Children ate it without complaint because it tasted mild and familiar. Adults ate it because it was filling and required no effort after a day of work that had already taken everything they had. People stopped eating this because they call it poor. They associate it with hardship and lack, and they do not want to be reminded of those times. But this bowl kept people going when there was nothing fancy left to lean on. It was humble, yes, but it was also honest, and it worked. If a family could eat like this on $2 a week, ask yourself what changed: the pantry or the prices or the skills. Next, you'll see which easy foods replaced these and why your bill went up.